So, hello and welcome to From Salem with Love. I'm Jacob. My goodness, I forgot my Instagram name. Fiber Dreams by Jacob on Instagram and Tongue Twister on TikTok. Jacob and I had to be. And
Jacob is fucking radiant.
yeah.
I'm Anna Campos, and I own Circle of Stitches in Salem, Massachusetts. My pronouns are she, her, and they. And thank you for joining us for another episode. Yay! So let's start with what are you wearing today?
So I am wearing the Shifty hat by Andrea Mowry because we love her here. And then I finished my test knit from Jamie Lomax. It will be available on January 21st on Ravelry.
Excellent. Beautiful.
So I think we're going to go over what you're wearing. Sorry.
So I finally finished my Nightshades version of Nevasca. I'm so excited because now I have a white version and a black version, and I'm very psyched. So here's my original, and here's my new one.
Pretty.
Yeah, they're both knit in Harrisville, but we're going to talk about some yarn suggestions for the things that we're wearing first,
yes.
Right? So do we want to start with your Shifty?
Yeah, so the Shifty uses two colors in the pattern anyways of Spincycle yarn, but we had also you could use some different types of yarn that aren't just specifically Spincycle if you choose. So we suggest that you would use a fingerling yarn if you were to do it because Spincycle, it's kind of like they market it as sport and it can also be used as a fingerling, right?
Yeah, so the way that they describe it is they describe it as a fingering compatible sport weight. It's got a super tight twist, so it does bloom after blocking a little bit, but it's definitely comparable to a fingering weight. So either you're going to use it with a sport weight that runs a little bit on the thinner side, or you're going to avoid something like Malabrigo Arroyo, which tends to be heavier, or you can use it with a fingering weight. And so you used Malabrigo for yours?
I did. On this one, actually, I think I used sport on this one.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. But for the ones that we're suggesting on this one, we'll suggest the fingerling one. So yeah. We have a couple combinations that we wanted to show you, some really fun colors, and then we're gonna go into some Spincycle ones, and it'll just be a fun time. Fun time. Woo! Okay, sorry. I'm like really energetic today. But so this is one of my favorite colors. It's the Archangel. I think I showed it last episode, but I have another color that you could add with it that would look really pretty knit up, and that is, let me get the name of it. Oh, no.
Sabiduria.
Thank you.
It means wisdom in Spanish.
She knew it. She knew I was going to totally butcher that up.
Yeah, so it's really pretty together.
Yeah, and it's fun because they kind of like, with the pattern, you only need the two colors, but you kind of switch the way that they go. So it would be really, really pretty knit up together.
Yeah, and for anyone who hasn't done one of the Andrea Mowry, shift patterns, because she has the cowl, she has the night shift shawl, she has the shifty hat. Actually, it might be shift hat, and because there's the shifty sweater. Either way, they're all variations of the word shift.
We will put the link in the description below.
Yeah, but this is a really good way to try color work for the first time if you haven't, because this is mosaic knitting, and it's a lot easier than stranded because you only work one color per row or round, and just slip the other, slip stitches to create the patterning. So if you've never done any type of color work, this is a really good.
And like actually, when I did this one, I remember actually specifically saying to you, "Oh, I'm too afraid to do color work," and then you saw that I was knitting that, and you're like, "You're literally doing color work right now." So, fun little story.
So I picked a couple of colors of Malabrigo Sock as well. So this is Arco Iris, which means rainbow, and this one is Fresco y Seco, which means fresh and dry.
Ooh.
I feel like I'm missing some sort of inside.
Likes to be fresh and dry.
I feel like I'm missing some sort of inside joke.
I mean, you could make one.
So those are a couple of options, and not Spincycle that will still give you some fun colors. So if you can do it with two solid colors, but it's going to kind of lose a little bit of the interest of a pattern. You do need the yarn to do a little bit of the work.
Yeah.
But then we also picked a couple of Spincycle combinations, right?
So I don't know why I hadn't seen this color earlier in the store, but now I'm obsessed with it. It's this one from Spincycle. It is called Shades of Earth.
Oh yeah, that's one of my favorites.
It's so pretty. It goes a little bit with my nails. I'm okay with that. And then this one that definitely is going to go with the nails today is the Tangled Up in Blue.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that they would just look so pretty together.
Mm-hmm. And Tangled Up in Blue, by the way, is a discontinued colorway. We still have a bunch of it, but if you like it, you should grab it before it's gone.
All right. And which one did you have?
So, of course, because I'm me, I had to pick a purple. So this is actually one of the new colors that we just got in. This is Rosy Maple. And I paired it with one of my favorites, which is Stay Out of the Forest, which is some bright orange, so that it'll pick up on the orange pops that we have in the Rosy Maple. Ooh. So I would use this as the main color, right? So you get the darker brim, but then you get that play of orange and purple.
It would be so pretty. And then I think we tend to go off of each other with color choices sometimes. Mm-hmm. I don't think I have the same one that you have.
No,
but another purpley maroon?
Yeah, it's like a Merlot thing going.
Yeah. I want Merlot.
It's probably better that we're not having wine on them.
Why not? This. And then this one is Dead Reckoning, and they would just look so pretty together.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, because Dead Reckoning has a little bit of that like lavender, and that would really get emphasized with the nostalgia.
Closer up. I'm learning where the camera is on the iPad now, finally. It's so good. It only took 7 episodes. All right. And did you have colors picked for your
Oh yeah, so for my Nevasca shawl, right, this was one of my designs, and Nevasca means like basically snowstorm in Portuguese, and we just had our first snowstorm here, so this is like the perfect cozy shawl. And so the yarns I decided for are the Harrisville American Cornmeal lines. This is made with American wool, and there's an all black palette and an all ecru palette. And so the daylights are all ecru, and I used a color called Bloodshot, so you can see it has a little bit of red spun into the white. And then for this one, I used Nightshades, which is the black palette, and this color is called Stiletto, and it has a little bit of like magenta spun into it, of pink. It's really pretty. Mm-hmm. So obviously this yarn works really well, but if you wanted to go a different approach, you could use our Woolfolk Tov DK. And this is a beautiful, super fine merino.
So soft.
Yeah, DK weight, and you can see how much drape it has, even like the skein drapes, right? So if you did that, you'd get a really beautiful, like neutral drapey shawl. Mm-hmm. And another option would be to go for the La Bien-Aimée Merino DK. This color is called Ayre, A-Y-R-E, and this would just be really pretty. You'd kind of get that like snowfall with like, speckles of color throughout. So those are some other ideas.
All right, so then...
Tell us about your cowl.
Yeah, so continuing on with the cowl, because I'm so excited for her to be releasing this.
Yeah, Jamie is really talented with doing like really beautiful graphic
She really is.
In her knitting.
So I'm going to take it off so you guys can see it.
And this is called the Sitka cowl, right?
Yep, the Sitka Spruce single-sided cowl, because she already has one that's out that is a double-sided kind of that you...
Sort of like a donut. So you knit it in a tube and connect. Yeah.
And then you would connect it. So this one is... the single-sided version. I'm hoping that I have the right side facing you, because one side I was just learning with a whole bunch of different things, but it has a whole bunch of little baubles in there, which I found that honestly when I was doing the baubles I was like probably swearing a little bit, but I found that it was so fun to do this cowl just because you really get a lot of practice. Yeah. And whereas they're not like a standard bauble, you kind of have to play with how you're going to do it, so how you do it, how you would like the bauble to be and how big it would be. So there's a ton of methods that you can play with on that, but I picked out a couple colors to kind of that would go well with this, and then I believe you picked out colors as well. No, oh, never mind then. I picked out colors.
Sorry, I let you do that one.
We are always so prepared. I mean,
okay, to be fair, you could do it in the Harrisville Nightshades and Daylights and have a black and white version.
True, and then you have that purple and green there that you could...
No, that's the wrong way.
Oh, never mind. Okay, I'm just going to be quiet and talk about my color choices. Anywho, so, first ones that I'm doing, because I love La Bien-Aimée, and mine's in La Bien-Aimée, and it's so soft, like...
It really is.
You just want to pet it and squeeze it and, talk dirty to it. Anyways,
Ooh.
I know. So this one is called Loam. And I found that thought that it would be really pretty with the Spincycle one called Salty Dog. Just because also it reminds me of Rank Okra, and I love that one too. So,
Yeah.
I did a couple. I wanted to do a low contrast option because it is an option. A lot of people feel like it has to be like really boom in your face with color differentials. But we did this lovely Quartz Fume.
Oh, Quartz Fume. Yeah. It means quartz, smoky quartz.
Mm-hmm. And then we did High Garden.
Mm-hmm.
I thought it would just be very pretty, nice and sweet.
Yeah.
All right. And then the other one, so I picked because the sample photo on the pattern had these colors, so I thought that it would be good to kind of show an option that's here. We have the Winterfell, which I used for my contrast color.
Mm-hmm.
And then we have caramel together.
That's beautiful.
It would look very pretty together. Oh, and I have itchy nose today. And then another one that I felt kind of doing the color family. I hope I got the right daylights at the green tinge. I hope. So I did the Harrisville Daylights.
Yeah, that's color 826.
826. And then I thought that it would go nice with the Arbor. Also, I've done color work in the Arbor before, and the stitches are nice and crisp, and you really see that definition with the color work.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's Brooklyn Tweed Arbor, by the way.
Oh, sorry.
Yeah. And that's a really good example of a worsted spun yarn, which we'll talk about later.
Okay.
Beautiful.
So are we going to do a question?
Yeah, so we have a couple of viewer questions that we're going to answer today. And a couple of these are from Lori, who goes by Violet Knit RN on Instagram, and who hasn't been here in person in a long time, but I'm glad that you're still around in our online community. So she wanted to ask both of us, what do you prefer for materials for your needles, wood, metal, or other?
So I have slightly experimented with wood. I prefer the metal ones, like the Shiagu that we have here.
Mm-hmm.
I haven't done anything with different. I normally am like a merino or a wool. I haven't played with lace or anything like that. So I tend to prefer the metal ones or the surgical steel. Needles.
Yeah. So, in general, I also prefer metal needles. I like that metal. It makes you knit faster because there's not a lot of friction. Mm-hmm. I'm more picky about the point. I like sharp tips. So I like the Chogu lace tips, or anything that has a sharper tip. I don't like the rounded tip because that kind of slows you down on picking up the stitches. The only exception for me is when I'm knitting linen. I really, really struggle with getting gauge with linen, and I end up on really tiny needles because it's so slippery. And so when I'm knitting linen specifically, I will work with wooden needles because then I don't have to go down as many sizes because the wood grips the linen. So that's the one exception to that.
Good.
Yeah. So there you go. And so I guess we agree.
We do.
Excellent. So, also from Lori, what is your preferred method to knit small circumferences? Circular needles, double points, do you do magic loop, 2 circulars?
So I have a personal vendetta against double points because I don't get along with them. So I normally am magic loop for my method. I just find it easier for me anyways to do.
Yeah, so you just use a super long circular needle and do magic loop. Yeah.
Yes.
I don't like magic loop.
I know.
Yeah. And I'm right, obviously. I don't like magic loop because I've actually found that it loosens my gauge, but also having to keep adjusting the cable feels like such a waste of time. It drives me absolutely mental. And so I am a big fan of double points. I am not a fan of small circulars, like the small circumference circulars, like the 9-inch. Because the tips are really small, and because I'm a continental knitter, I tend to leverage off my knitting needle. And if the tips are too small, it actually makes my hands cramp. But I have
same. It's like right here that it like literally.
For me, it's like here.
Yeah, I'm like right here, but I also tend to hold my needles like I have a death grip on them. So yeah.
But yeah, I have found that for small circumference needles, people who throw instead of picking tend to like it better because they don't leverage off the needles in the same way.
And I probably will like double points if I practice more, but I'm just not willing to go there yet.
But also with double points and with circulars, you know, quality of material really matters. Like, you know, way back in the day when I was knitting with my first set of circular needles, which was the Boy Needle Master by I think it's Susan Bates. The cable is plastic, but it's very, very, very stiff. And so for a long time, I was convinced that magic loop was a myth because that cable just did not bend that way at all. And with the Chaogus, you have a very nice coated, flexible cable, and so magic loop is really easy.
It's like a lace, right? No, what's in the middle part?
It's like braided. It's like braided steel covered with like a plastic.
All right.
You know, like cap. It's very, very smooth. But like the first time that I tried double points, I remember I was trying to knit a pair of mittens and I was using metal double points and they kept falling out of my project. And I was like, this is the worst thing ever. And so there's an exception to my metal rule with double points. I'll use wood double points, or my favorites are the carbons by Knitter's Pride, which is carbon fiber in the center and steel tips, so you get the grippiness of the wood in the center of the needle so it doesn't fall out, but the tips are metal so you can still knit fast.
While you start with your thing, I might go grab those carbons so we can show them, and then we can talk about the worst.
Oh yeah, okay.
Yeah, so I'll go grab that while you can start the worsted thing.
Okay. Yeah. All right, sounds good. You can see our, you know, like live planning going on here. So one of the things that I wanted to talk about today, just to give you folks a little bit of a tip, is the difference between worsted spun and woolen spun yarns, which is something that tends to confuse people. Because when we say worsted, we tend to think about weights of yarn, you know, worsted being a medium weight, you know, heavier than DK, thinner than Aran, but it also has to do with the type of spinning. And so you can have a worsted spun fingering weight yarn, for example. And so what does that mean? It has to do with how the yarn itself is spun. And for example, if we look at this skein of Broken Tweed Loft, this is a fingering weight. If you look at the yarn, you can see that it's pretty fluffy and the strand isn't super crisp, right? It's fluffy and kind of loose. And one of the things that Jacob had mentioned about the Brooklyn Tweed Arbor is how tight the spin looks. And so if you compare this to a Malabrigo sock, right? These are both fingering weights, but look at how different, come on in. Look at how different the spin looks on both of these. And so the tight spin and twist that you see here, this is called a worsted spun, and this fluffier kind is called a woolen spun. And so what that means is it's going to impact what your fabric looks like. And here's another woolen spun. Harrisville Designs, the mill in New Hampshire that we're a big fan of, they are especially known for their woolen spun yarns. So, you know, Daylights and Nightshades are also woolen spun. And so the good thing about woolen spun is that it's going to be very fluffy. It's very light. Brooklyn Tweed Shelter is a woolen spun, and I have an example in here, don't I? Well, this is my Harrisville. This is Harrisville Watershed, which is similar to Brooklyn Tweed Shelter. And what it does is it makes a really light yarn, and so you can knit like a worsted weight sweater, and it's going to be fluffy and warm, but it's not going to be super heavy, right? But the downside is that your stitches aren't going to be as crisp, and so this tends to be used more for like tweedy yarns because you get that nice fluffy color fleck situation going. And this is a skein of Quince Lark. I feel like I've gone all over the place, so I hope this is making sense. Right? You can see that this has a much tighter twist, and so a worsted spun is going to give you really good stitch definition, right? You had mentioned that the Arbor gave you like really crisp stitches, whereas something like this, your stitch definition isn't going to be as crisp. You're going to get more of that like woolly look, right? But this is still beautiful for color work. It's still beautiful for cables, but it's not going to look as defined, right? And you can see that a little bit in my shawl here. All right, I'm going to get close here, right? Like you can see that this yarn, like this, you can still see the design, but the stitches aren't like super crisp, and that's because of the spin. And so there's my sort of brief explanation of worsted versus woolen spun yarns, right? And you can just see like all these textural differences. And so just something to keep in mind. the worsted spun yarns, the tight spun yarns tend to be much stronger as far as tensile strength. Like you can pull on it and it's not going to break. One of the complaints that you hear with the woolen spun is people will say, oh, Brooklyn tweed breaks really easy, like if you tug on it. And so the woolen spun yarns don't have as much tensile strength, so you can't death grip it, which is probably a good thing. It's going to teach you to relax. So it might take a little practice if you're finding yourself snapping it while you're working with it. But then the plus is that when you're done and you block it and the yarn blooms, it is just super, super squishy. So, you know, they both have their ups and downs.
My sad story with that was when I was finishing off a project, because I've learned over the years that you need to be a little bit more careful with that yarn, but I was finishing off a project and I went to go and pull the end of it close through the last stitch, and I like pulled hard and literally had about an end like this big to weave in. All right, so going back to those double pointed needles, I just wanted to show you what we were talking about when we were doing that. So we didn't talk about the driftwood ones, but this is an option of the wooden driftwoods.
Yeah, those are birch needles, I think they're made of. Yeah,
they're just very pretty.
They are really pretty.
But
they're nice and hard, like, you know, so they're a strong needle. If you tend to death grip your needles, depending if it's bamboo, sometimes you can warp the double points over time from death gripping them, especially on the smaller numbers, so you end up with like bowed needles.
So maybe I should just stay to my magic loop.
Or you can get the carbon fiber, which is impossible to break.
These guys. Hey. Alright, and then the last one to show you is...
Yeah, so that's clover, and those are the bamboo ones. And they are wonderful, but, you know, if you death grip the smaller ones over time, you will end up with a little bit of a warp. Because I have all my, you know, I used to knit my socks on the wooden ones, and so now all my wooden size ones are a little bit bent. But, you know, now I use the carbon, so I don't have to worry about it. Yeah. And so we have one last viewer question that we're going to answer today, and this was from Ruth, and Ruth wanted a tip on tangled yarn. Ruth, my friend, when you have a tangled skein, you're going to stand up, and you're going to walk over to the trash can and throw it out.
And scream.
Okay, just kidding though. So... There's not like a secret to untangling yarn. If you really hate doing it, there are actually groups on Ravelry of people who love untangling yarn, and you can mail it to them and they'll do it for you.
That's it.
You know? It's funny because
I love them, but they might need help.
I am very cranky about my own yarn being tangled, but I don't mind untangling someone else's because I don't have the emotional attachment, so I sort of get it. But don't mail me your yarn, I'm not untangling it for you.
Jerry witnessed my meltdown with the Latvian braid of it going like this and then trying to let it go so it would untangle that way.
Yeah. So I think the one sort of universal tip that I can give is that when you're untangling yarn, people have a tendency to try and pull as much as they can to roll back into a ball, and the more you pull, the more it's going to tighten the knot. So what I tend to do is I grab the skein and I shake it out as much as I can and pull it open. And then I untangle as I go, and then I keep doing that. So keep stretching and untangling. Resist the urge to pull because you're going to tighten knots. Also, if you are untangling mohair, take a deep breath, first of all, because it is a nightmare. But if you put mohair in the freezer, it actually takes away some of the static electricity. And so it's easier to wind or untangle mohair if it's frozen first.
And make sure you don't have sweaty hands.
That's also true.
Yeah.
Yeah, but...
I learned.
Yeah, but I wish there was like a really good trick. I would also honestly say that if you are comfortable, rejoining ends and working with smaller balls, if you get to a part that's really hard, just cut the skein and keep going. Like, it's okay to end up with 2 half skeins if it's going to make your life a little bit easier. And
there's also like several different YouTubes of how to join those and not just have to do the knots and do all different things. So yeah, we can go over that next episode.
Oh yeah, different ways of joining. Sure, we can do that.
All right.
Great.
Well, I hope you enjoyed our time with us. This is From Salem with Love. If you like it, like, comment, subscribe, and share with all your friends.
Bye, everyone. Until next time.
Testing 1, 2, 3.